Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to be tackling email fraud, and how to protect ourselves from it.
It's really quite something, isn't it, how much we rely on email these days?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we use it for everything.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder how vulnerable we really are to these scams.
That's a good point. So let's get started with the basics. What exactly is email fraud?
Well, at its heart, it's any kind of deception that uses email, as the tool.
Hmm.
And the aim is to steal your information, maybe your money, or even just manipulate you somehow.
So it's a lot more than those "you won the lottery" emails.
Oh, yeah, definitely. It's much more than that these days. Email fraud's gotten really sophisticated. They're targeting individuals and businesses.
Right. So let's get into some of the most common scams, starting with phishing. I think most people have heard of that, but can you break it down, how it actually works?
Sure, phishing is basically like a bait and switch. You get an email and it looks totally legit. Maybe it's from your bank or a store you use or even a government agency.
I've seen those. Yeah, and it'll say something like, there's a problem with your account or you need to update your information right away.
They always make it sound so urgent.
Exactly. It's all about creating that panic so you don't think straight.
Yeah.
And of course, there's a link in the email, and if you click it, bam, you're on a fake website designed to steal your login details.
Oh, I almost fell for one of those once. It looked exactly like my favorite online store.
Oh, yeah. They could be super convincing.
Yeah.
And then there's spear phishing, which is even trickier.
Oh, how so?
Well, it's not about casting a wide net like
Hmm.
regular phishing. Spear phishing is all about, creating really specific lure for one person or one company.
So it's more targeted?
Exactly. Like imagine you're working on this big project at your company, right?
Mm.
And you get an email that looks like it's from one of your vendors, even mentioning details about the project.
I probably think it was legit.
Right. Because they're using public information to make it seem super personalized. And that's how spear phishing works.
Wow, that's scary. Then there's BEC, business email compromise, which seems to focus on organizations.
You got it. BEC scams are all about businesses, especially the ones that, handle finances. Like, picture this. An employee in the finance department gets an email, and it looks like it's from the CEO asking for a big money transfer to a new supplier.
And they just do it.
Well, they trust the CEO, right? So they initiate the transfer without even verifying, and poof, the money's gone.
That's a huge problem. Okay, what about farming? Our sources mentioned that too.
Right, so farming is a little different. It's less about the email itself and more about manipulating websites.
How so?
You might click a link in an email that seems harmless, like a link to your bank's website, but it actually redirects you to a fake site that's designed to steal your login info. It's like a trapdoor disguised as a welcome mat.
Yikes. So we've got phishing, spear phishing, BC, and farming. What other types of scams are out there?
Oh, there are quite a few, actually. There's invoice fraud, where scammers send fake invoices pretending to be legit businesses. And then there's the 419 scam, also known as the advance fee fraud, where they promise you a fortune, but you have to pay a fee up front to claim it.
Oh, right. The classic Nigerian prince scam.
Exactly. That's a prime example.
Yeah.
And sadly, those scams still work.
That's crazy. Okay, what about the scams that pretend to help, like tech support scams?
Oh, those are really sneaky. They prey on your fear of viruses or a broken computer.
Yeah.
You might get an email claiming to be from Microsoft or Apple saying there's a problem with your device. And, they offer to fix it for a fee, of course.
It's like they know exactly what scares us.
They do.
Yeah.
And we also have to watch out for fake charity scams, especially after like a big disaster or event.
Right when people want to help.
Exactly. They exploit people's generosity, asking for donations to charities that don't even exist. They might even use real charity names and logos to seem legit. It's heartbreaking, really.
Okay, so we've seen a whole bunch of scams, each with its own tricks. But what makes these tactics actually work? Why do people fall for them?
That's where things get really interesting. Email scammers are masters of manipulation.
Yeah.
They use these tactics that are designed to basically bypass our logical thinking and make us react emotionally. It's almost like they're hacking our minds.
Hacking our minds instead of our computers.
Exactly.
Mm.
Think about the common thread in all these scams. There's often that sense of urgency, like, you need to act now. They might also leverage our trust in authority, like a CEO or a bank. And then there's the classic too good to be true offer, like winning a lottery you never even entered.
So they're pushing our emotional buttons, making us act without thinking things through. That's kind of scary how effective it can be. But before we all panic, let's talk about how we can protect ourselves.
Absolutely. The best defense is knowledge. Now that we know the enemy, we can start building our defenses.
Okay, so how do we actually build those defenses? What can we do, like practical steps to spot these scams and avoid them?
One of the most important things is to be super wary of any email that asks for personal information, especially things like your bank account number or your credit card details.
Yeah, that seems like a pretty obvious red flag.
It is. But you'd be surprised how clever scammers can be with how they phrase those requests. Like they might say there's been a security breach or something.
Oh, so they play on your fears?
Exactly. So always remember, legit organizations, they almost never ask for that kind of sensitive information over email.
So if you get an email asking for your bank details, you just delete it.
Pretty much. And if you have any doubts at all, just contact the organization directly through their official website or phone number, the ones you know are real. Don't click any links in the email just in case.
Good advice. Now, what about emails that have links or attachments in them? How can we tell if those are safe?
Yeah, that's another area where you got to be really cautious.
Yeah.
Even if the email looks like it's from someone you know, always double check that sender's address. Look for misspellings or anything that seems off.
Because they could be spoofing the address.
Exactly. Hackers can easily make it look like a message is coming from a trusted source when it's really not. And never, ever click on a link unless you're absolutely sure it's safe.
So how can you tell?
A good trick is to hover your mouse over the link without clicking. You could usually see the full URL, and that can give you a clue where it's really going to take you.
Oh, that's helpful. What other red flags should we watch out for?
One of the biggest ones is a sense of urgency in the email. If they're demanding immediate action or threatening bad stuff if you don't comply, that's a huge warning sign.
Like they're trying to pressure you into making a mistake.
Exactly. They don't want you to think, they want you to react. So anytime you see those urgent demands or threats, take a breath. Analyze the situation. Don't panic.
Stay calm and rational.
Right. And always remember, if something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Those promises of easy money or amazing deals, they're often just traps to steal your info or your money.
That's a good rule of thumb. Okay, so we've talked about spotting suspicious emails, but what about proactive steps we can take to protect ourselves?
One of the simplest and most effective things is to enable two-factor authentication on all your important accounts. Email, banking, social media, all that.
I've heard of that, but can you explain how it works?
Sure. It's basically an extra layer of security. So when you log in, it requires you to enter a code from your phone or email in addition to your password.
So even if they get your password?
They still can't get in without that extra code. It's a really simple but powerful security measure.
Okay, that makes sense. Our sources also mentioned using strong and unique passwords for all your accounts.
Absolutely. That's super important. Don't use the same password for everything. And make sure your passwords are a good mix of upper and lowercase letters, numbers, and symbols. At least 12 characters long is a good rule of thumb.
Right. Okay. And what about those anti-phishing tools? How do they work?
A lot of email providers have built-in spam filters that can catch some phishing emails. But there are also third-party software options that offer even more protection.
So they can help identify and block those bad emails.
Exactly. They can analyze emails for suspicious patterns like weird sender addresses, links to known phishing websites, or attachments that might contain malware.
It's like having an extra set of eyes watching out for you.
Kind of. But even with all the tech in the world, your own vigilance is still the best defense.
So being mindful of what you click on, what info you share, who you trust, all that.
Exactly. It's about developing that healthy skepticism. Trust but verify. If something feels off about an email, take a minute to investigate before you do anything.
Better safe than sorry. Now, our sources also talked about email authentication protocols, things like SPF DKIM and DMRs. Can you break those down for us?
Sure. Those protocols are all about making sure your emails are actually coming from who they say they are and that they haven't been messed with along the way. Okay. Think of it like a secure package delivery system.
Okay, I like that analogy.
So SPS stands for Sender Policy Framework, and it's like a return address on a package. It tells email providers which mail servers are allowed to send emails from a specific domain.
So it helps prevent spoofing.
Exactly. Then there's DKIM, or Domain Keys Identified Mail. It's like a tamper-evident seal on that package. It adds a digital signature to each email, so it hasn't been altered in transit.
Makes sense. And what about DMR?
DMRC stands for Domain-Based Message Authentication Reporting in Conformance. And it's like giving specific instructions to the delivery service on how to handle suspicious packages. It tells email providers what to do with emails that fail those SPF and DPM checks.
So they can block them or quarantine them?
Exactly. It gives domain owners more control over how their email is handled and helps stop those fraudulent emails from reaching their targets.
It sounds like these protocols are super important for staying safe online. But even with all these safeguards, is it still possible to fall victim to a scam?
Unfortunately, yeah. Scammers are always coming up with new tricks. But the good news is the more we know about these threats, the better we can protect ourselves.
So knowledge is power.
Absolutely. And if you do fall for a scam, don't beat yourself up. It happens. It's important to report it, though, to the right authorities.
So who should we report these scams to?
For phishing emails, you can forward the message to the Anti-Phishing Working Group at reportphishing@apwg.org. You can also report it to the organization that this scammer is impersonating, like your bank or whatever.
And if you've lost money or had your identity stolen, you should definitely report it to the police and the Federal Trade Commission.
Exactly. Don't be afraid to ask for help. There are resources out there to help victims of email fraud recover from these incidents.
That's good to know. It's important to remember that you're not alone in this. Email fraud is a huge problem, and it's nothing to be ashamed of if it happens to you.
That's right. We need to create a culture where people feel comfortable reporting these scams and asking for help, without feeling embarrassed or judged.
This deep dive has been really eye-opening. We've learned a lot about the different types of scams, the psychology behind them, and the steps we can take to stay safe.
It's been a fascinating look at how technology and human behavior interact. And it's a reminder that cybersecurity is everyone's responsibility in this digital age.
Well said. We all need to be aware of these threats and protect ourselves and our family.
Absolutely. By working together and staying informed, we can make the online world a safer place for everyone.
It's kind of crazy when you think about it, these email scams. They're like digital versions of those old school con artists you see in the movies.
Yeah, it is kind of like that, isn't it? Gain your trust, create a sense of urgency, and then bam, they get you.
And it all comes down to human psychology. They know how to push our buttons and make us do things without thinking.
Exactly. They're exploiting our emotions, not just, our computers.
So even in this digital world, we're still vulnerable to those same old tricks. But, on a more positive note, this whole deep dive into email fraud, it really shows how important it is to work together.
Oh, absolutely. We can't fight this alone.
Mhm.
We need to share information, report anything suspicious, educate each other. It's like a digital neighborhood watch.
I like that. Now, we've talked a lot about those email authentication protocols, SPF, DKIM, and DMARC-A. Can you remind us again, how those actually work and why they're so important?
Sure. Think of them like digital security guards for your email. They help make sure that the message is really coming from who it says it's from and that no one's messed with it along the way.
Like the bouncers at a club checking IDs.
Exactly. So SPF, that stands for Sender Policy Framework. And it's kind of like checking the return address on a package. It tells email providers which mail servers are allowed to send emails from a certain domain.
So it helps prevent those spoofing attacks we talked about.
Right. And then there's DKIM domain keys identified mail. It's like putting a tamper-proof seal on that package. It adds a digital signature to every email, so, it hasn't been changed in transit.
Okay, that makes sense. So no one's opened the package and messed with the contents.
Exactly. And then lastly, there's DMRC, which stands for Domain-Based Message Authentication Reporting and Conformance. This one's like giving specific instructions to the delivery service on how to handle any packages that look suspicious.
So telling them what to do if the package doesn't pass the other checks?
Right. It tells email providers what to do with the emails that fail those SPF and DKIM checks. Like, should they block it, quarantine it, or deliver it anyway?
So it gives the domain owner more control.
Exactly. And it helps prevent those fraudulent emails from ever reaching their intended target.
These protocols sound really crucial for staying safe online. But even with them, is it still possible to, fall victim to a scam?
I mean, unfortunately, yeah, scammers are always trying to find new ways to trick people. But the good news is the more we all know about these threats, the better prepared we are to avoid them.
So we need to keep learning and stay informed.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's not just about protecting ourselves. It's about protecting our families, our friends, our colleagues, everyone. By spreading awareness and sharing what we know, we can make a real difference.
This deep dive has been really eye-opening. We've learned so much about how these scams work, the psychology behind them, and the steps we can take to stay safe.
It's been fascinating to explore this whole intersection of technology and human behavior, you know? And it really highlights the fact that cybersecurity is everyone's responsibility these days.
Well said. So as we wrap up this exploration of email fraud, I want to leave our listeners with a sense of, hope and a call to action. These threats are real, but so are the solutions.
I agree. We can all do our part. By working together, staying informed, staying vigilant, we can navigate the online world safely and confidently.
So knowledge is power. Stay curious, stay skeptical, and stay safe out there, everyone.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of email fraud. Until next time.